Tuesday, the 25th of November 2025. My name is Councillor Simon Werner and I'll be chairing the meeting. The meeting is being held in person at York House, Windsor, and via Zoom, streamed live to the public on YouTube. I remind all attendees in the meeting that participation indicates consent to the audio and video being streamed live and acknowledgement that after the meeting it will continue to be available in the public domain. Firstly, it will be useful if all Cabinet members would introduce themselves. I'm Simon Werner and I'm the leader of the Council and Cabinet Member for Community Partnerships and Maidenhead.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Lynn Jones, Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Finance.
Good evening, Councillor Mark Wilson, Cabinet Member for Corporate Services.
Good evening, Councillor Jeff Hill, Cabinet Member for Highways, Transport and Customer Service Centre.
Good evening, Councillor Richard Coe, Cabinet Member for Household and Regulatory Services.
Hello, Councillor Amy Teasey, Cabinet Member for Children's Services, Education and Windsor.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Adam Burmage and I'm the Cabinet Member for Planning, Governance and Asset Management.
Hello, good evening, I'm Councillor Jack Douglas, I'm Cabinet Member for Leisure and Communities.
Hello, and I'm Councillor Karen Davis, Lead Member for Climate, Biodiversity and Windsor Town Council.
Councillor Catherine Del Campo, Lead Member for Adult Services, Health and Housing Services.
Thank you very much. For councillors and officers who have not introduced themselves, once I've invited them to speak, please, before you do so, state your name and the capacity in which you are speaking, if appropriate. We've got one public speaker registered for this evening's meeting on agenda items 6, 7 and 12. I'd just like to take this opportunity to remind all persons wishing to speak at tonight's meeting that all comments should please specifically be in relation to the agenda item and its published report. We'll now start on the agenda items. Do we have any apologies for absence?
No apologies received, Chair.
Do we have any declarations of interests? No. Minutes. Can I approve the minutes of the meeting?
Agreed.
Fantastic. We've got one appointment as a representative for Islam in Group A on the Standing Advisory Council for Religious Education, called SACRI. I don't think we need to vote on that, do we? No. Forward plan. Have we got any additions to the forward plan or changes?
So we've got a total of 7 changes from the Cabinet meeting held at the end of October. I'll just go through them quickly now. So we've got Desborough Park Flood Alleviation Scheme, was originally scheduled for the November Cabinet meeting and has now been pushed back to the January Cabinet meeting. That's because of its awaiting key financial information. Home Park Public is a new item and that will be coming to January Cabinet. The Financial Improvement and Sustainability Plan, 1 year on, was coming to the November Cabinet, is now coming to the December Cabinet, and this is so it coincides with the draft budget, which would also be considered by Cabinet in December. The grounds maintenance contract, delegation of authority to award, was on for November and will now be coming in January, and that's because further work is required to be undertaken by officers. The lease of Windsor allotments to Windsor Allotment Society was originally scheduled for December Cabinet and will now be coming in January. And this is just to assist with the agenda management of the December meeting, as that's the one we're having the draft budget for. The Environment and Climate Strategy 2026 to 2035 has been added for March as a new item. And the award of the Arboricultural Services contract has also been added as a new item, and that's for January.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Anything else people would like to add? Adam.
Thank you, Simon. I've got 2 items that I wish to add. First one is Development Management Local Validation List, decision to adopt for the January Cabinet. Also, we have the Maidenhead Neighbourhood Plan decision to proceed to referendum for the January Cabinet. I think we might be at the January Cabinet for till the early hours, but hopefully we can manage it. Thank you.
Fantastic. Any other additions? No. Okay, we'll move on then to item 6, which is the month 6 budget monitoring report. Lynn.
Thank you. The paper before you is the month 6 budget monitoring taken us up to the end of September. This details the current forecast overspend on service budget stands at 4.202 million, with an underspend of 424,000 on non-service budgets. This overspend is contained within the existing contingency budget. There is a forecast underspend of 485,000 in the forecast capital outturn. That's a slippage of 28 million. You can find that in Appendix B. And 2 new capital projects are seeking approval. There are no environments requested in this month's paper. There is an approval required for the debt write-off detailed in Appendix F. The main changes to the upturn forecast include a forecast overspend of 256,000 in adult services for the first time this year, with costs increasing for legal services, out of hours cover, and the records and coroners services. These are detailed at paragraph 5.2, 3 and 4. The Mosaic system, introduced this year to support more effective social care recording and efficient working practices, continues to give us the data that the organisation had been sadly lacking to correct budget for costs. At paragraph 5.8 figure 1, you can see that although numbers of clients currently have reduced, the cost of new care packages continues to rise, and that is a risk going forward. In children's services, the placement budget continues to show volatility, although the budget forecast remains stable. The details can be seen in paragraph 6.1 to 6.10. The Place Directorate forecast overspend has reduced by 92,000, including 32,000 in housing, although significant risks remain. Parking income is keeping track with the budget. The savings tracker shows a positive picture, with 2 million of the 5.5 million achieved, and the forecast showing we're only 179,000 off track at this stage out of 5.97 million of total savings, which is a much better trend than has been seen before. The trend in older sundry debt continues to be downwards as we see the rewards of extra focus. As we address the older debt, there will be those for legitimate reasons that cannot be recovered. Appendix F details an adult social care write-off that has been identified. Slippage of 28.6 million has been identified within the capital budget, paragraph 11.1. This is mainly attributable to the Ascot Health Hub, which is led by the ICB and as a result really out of our control. However, a 495,000 underspend overall on a budget of 60 million is a positive position, demonstrating the efforts we've made to refine the programme are paying off. Following a question from Councillor Conran, the forecast over underspend is now detailed as a separate column. Obviously, any reduction in spend will also make savings as far as interest paid and MRP. Figure 5 details the 25-26 capital funding and highlights that only 4.2 million of the 60 million is funded from our general fund. It is vital that we continue to ensure that borrowing is kept to a minimum. Appendix E details our treasury management, and our net borrowing is 198 million versus 223 million last March. This is at a point in time and not to be confused with our capital funding requirement, which is the council's underlying need to borrow, calculated annually to help plan long-term debt. There are 3 new capital projects. 11.3. Appendix C is the risks and opportunity document that highlights known risk with an estimated impact if it's able to be quantified. You can see from this report we're carrying increased risk due to the ongoing cost to support state visits. Now, this currently stands at 350,000. As a rural borough and home to Windsor Castle, we understand that the council has a role in supporting partners in the facilitation of royal events. However, it's clear that the scale of the running expenditure far exceeds what can be reasonably absorbed within our existing budgets. We face severe financial pressures this year and over the medium term, and we do not have a budget we can call on to deliver these state visits. And the new burdens doctrine is clear. Any decisions taken by government which financially impact local authorities will be funded. State visits are government-led, and we therefore expect them to fully reimburse the costs we've incurred for recent and future visits. It is frustrating that we are still in a position where we have no confirmation of our costs being reimbursed. especially when I understand that both the Royal Household and Thames Valley Police have had confirmations that their cost will be. Now, I'm saying this while preparations are underway for the next visit in just over a week's time, and with an expectation that state visits will continue to be hosted solely at Windsor Castle for the next couple of years, while Buckingham Palace is being refurbished. Yet we cannot continue to support these unless appropriate funding is received. Otherwise, we risk a detrimental impact on the services received by our communities. The 6 recommendations are on page 1 of the paper to note the month 6 outturn, approve the capital project and approve the debt write-off. Now, I've also got to mention the fair funding. At the end of last week, the government published their response to the fair funding review. While we are working through the finer detail, and we will need to wait until the provisional local government settlement is announced to get a better idea of allocations, it's very clear from our conversations with government that we are in a select group of councils that are the worst hit by the changes to how government grant is distributed. We had asked for a 4% funding floor, but it looks that what we'll get is a -5%. And this is it before we even reflect inflation and the increasing demand we face for our social care and housing services. Whatever way you cut it, this is a real terms cut in our funding, which seems absolutely farcical given our already challenging situation. But we will continue to set our case in our conversations with them this week, including on support, especially as they base their calculation to determine future levels of government funding with the assumption that all councils levy the equivalent of a national average council tax level. Our council tax is extremely low, and we also benchmark as a low-cost council. However, we are experiencing the same increase in service demand pressures as other areas. We are being forced into a situation where the only viable option is to raise council tax to bring it more in line with other councils nationally. Now, on a personal level, I am feeling very disappointed. Cabinet has worked hard with officers over the last 2 years to put in the financial governance, transform council services and protect frontline services to residents. There is no acknowledgement that the decisions regarding council tax levels taken over 10 years ago by previous administrations are still impacting our finances now. In real terms, we are receiving 35 million less annually than central government assumes when calculating our funding need. It feels like a kick in the teeth when we have done everything we can to resolve our financial situation. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Have we got any more speakers? Amy.
Thank you. I just, as lead for Windsor, just want to reiterate what Lynn said. You know, we're very proud to host these fantastic internationally enjoyed events in Windsor, and residents, you know, are proud to show off their town, but we simply can't make the burden, the financial burden, fall on our residents' shoulders. It just simply isn't fair on them. So I just support what Lynn said there. On a slightly more positive note, the report does mention the pressures of placement costs in children's services, particularly on residential placements. And the good news on that is that our new children's home has received its Ofsted registration and will be fully up and running very, very soon and welcoming the first residents. So that's a really good news story.
Fantastic. That's really good, Amy. Mark.
Thank you, Simon. Just like to comment, again, picking up Lynn's point around, in fact, how unfair the fair funding review actually is. 2 critical assumptions are made in the government model that are significantly inaccurate in our case. Firstly, for service need, the government model assumes that deprivation is the primary driver of the required spend. And that model gives a number for RBWM that is very significantly lower than our actual or expected budget need for 26-27. What deprivation does not pick up is the effect of elderly people moving into the borough late in life, into private care homes, and then when their wealth is depleted, RBWM pick up the bill. This clearly is inversely proportional to deprivation. People are attracted to the borough, and then it adds to our adult social care bill. Also, we have issues like county lines and exploitation, and we have statutory responsibilities in relation to those, and they're not proportionate to deprivation either. And then, as Lynn said, we have this assumption of our council tax being in line with the national average. You know, we've repeatedly stated, thanks to short-term historical decisions by the previous administrations, our council tax does not now cover statutory spend. It continues to be the lowest outside of central London and is approximately 25% or around £500 per Band D below the national average. Just to be very clear on this, government effectively assume we get £2,000 per Band D property, whereas in fact we get approximately 1,500. So with this fair funding calculation overall, they're overestimating our income by 35 million and very significantly underestimating our costs within this calculation. So the gap is huge. It's significantly more than 35 million. I know officers and senior colleagues are continuing the dialogue with MHCLG. These points are being explained, and I add my voice to request that our unique situation is taken into account properly and that the funding is indeed fair.
Thank you, Mark. Any other comments? Thank you, Lynn. Can we agree the paper? Oh, sorry, Councillor Price.
Regarding the state visits and that we're having to subsidise central government, are you actually taking this up with central government, the fact that we're bearing this cost?
Yes, we're in constant dialogue with them, and we're obviously having to address a number of departments. But I think I'll bring in Stephen now.
I wanted to support everything that councillors have said regarding state visits and throw my weight behind the call that government needs to fully refund the borough for its costs. I've written personally to government, and no one around this table takes the decision about a state visit happening or where it takes place. It is entirely a government decision in consultation with the royal household. And the fact that the royal household and the police are getting funded to kind of carry out their duties, and we are not, is completely unacceptable to me, to councillors, and to the taxpayers of the borough. And I'll continue to press with support of Cabinet to make sure we get our fair share. But as things stand, that call is falling on deaf ears.
Thank you. Then on to the fair funding review. With the money that we've had to borrow to keep going, I think that's from MHCLG. So is it the same department that's giving us money to keep us going and charging us interest that is now saying, actually, we're now going to give you less money? And is it a different section? Do they not talk to each other?
It is central government, and MHCLG are the people we are talking to around our funding. Obviously, there's other departments that do the calculations, but that is our point of contact around all of this.
Okay, thank you. And then to end on something that I think is positive, but I want to check, is the budget and how we're running at the moment, is that so far the forecast is that we will come out within the contingency that we've set. We're not overspending, which last year didn't happen. Is that right?
Yes, the forecast at the moment is saying that. Obviously, we do detail risks and opportunities, but it's mainly risks that could come through. But at the moment, all departments are saying that they're going to come in within those contingencies.
Thank you, Helen. I particularly like your last question. Thank you. Andrew Hill, I think, is online.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Werner. And thank you for the clear signs of improvement under your leadership, Councillor Jones. You're right that state visits cannot come at the expense of our vital services. Firstly, at paragraph 6.9, you report a pressure of 249,000 in legal advice for social care cases. To take another example, at the Nicholson planning meeting, rather than using one of our many free in-house solicitors and internal barristers, you were double spending on external solicitors and external barristers. Secondly, at paragraph 7.4, there appears to be a budget pressure of nearly £500,000 from business rates and utility charges for Sienna Court. How can such routine and entirely foreseeable matters as business rates and utility charges catch you unawares? Why were these not budgeted in advance? Thirdly, under reserves in table 12, you have an opening balance of around 10 million and then a transfer in of exactly 5 million, which appears to match borrowing. Can you confirm that that 5 million is direct borrowing using EFS? And if so, isn't this irrational? How can you build a reserve by borrowing money when you have insufficient capital assets to cover future debts? Isn't that like me saying, I'm bankrupt, but I need to pretend to be solvent, so I'll nip down Barclays, borrow 100,000, tell you I'm not bankrupt and tell you I'm rich? It hides the fact that I can't afford the interest payments, and as is 11 million, and I won't have sufficient assets to ever repay the £400 million capital debt. It's not residents' debt. We were kept in the dark, and I don't think RBWM has to pay this back. The government recently wrote off £500 million debt from Woking Council. Their residents are not being held accountable for that debt. Have you similarly asked government for our unlawful debt to be written off? And finally, Councillor Jones, your statement on unfair funding states, quote, being able to raise our council tax to bring it more in line with other councils nationally is the only viable option. So, Councillor Jones, you are saying that we should now expect even higher increases in council tax to cover the 35 million loss you mentioned, over and above the 9% we already fear. So what are the numbers? Is the current projected best and worst case scenario? What is that in percentage increases? And are you taking legal steps to challenge this impossibly unfair situation? Because that would be a proper and effective use of legal funding, in my view. Thank you.
Hi, Lynn, can I bring you in? Some of those questions were obviously about the next budget. They weren't about this particular paper. But if you can answer the questions about this monitoring report, that would be great.
Yeah, the 249,000 legal advice, that is a outsourced legal advice, and it's very specialised, and it's run with other councils, and we're seeing that we're having a number of more of these coming through this year than was expected. So that's why that is. Sienna Court, yep, I quite agree. We should have known about this. You know all our problems with the property company and record keeping, and this is why, you know, we're being completely transparent and saying that, you know, this is a problem, and I'm expecting to see options coming forward for Sienna Court as soon as we're able to resource it. The 5 million, that is a set that, you know, we have to have reserves, and we had reserves that were under the expected level according to central government. It's not, our borrowing and our debt is slightly different because we only bring down the amounts when we need them, because we internally borrow and other reasons and our cash flow. So it doesn't immediately translate to cost. So, you know, yes, we have to bring our reserves up to a level that is sustainable and is correct for an organisation our size, and that is expected of us. Woking, yes, we've already approached and asked about the same kind of issues, same kind of deal as Woking. We're not getting very much traction at the moment, but it is something that is being pursued. But, you know, your following one is a budget, and obviously the draft budget will be coming out. I didn't say able to, I said we are being forced to. You know, that's not something that we would like to do as a cabinet, to raise council tax. But given this funding, it's quite obvious that without them looking at us and increasing our funding, our only other option is to be forced to do that, or to borrow more, which is not a good deal for residents, because you're just paying interest back on what you earn at a very high level. I think that answered all your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Just to emphasise, I think it really shows the wisdom of getting rid of the property company. The transactions in a property company were completely opaque to everybody, I think, and that's why we put so much effort into getting rid of the property company, bringing it in-house, so we can actually see what's happening and then be transparent with the residents about what's happening in our property portfolio. So well done, Adam, particularly for leading on that. And Woking, yes, they had a load of money paid off, but it was only a third of the total debt that the Conservatives put Woking Council in. So I know Woking Council now are working very hard to fix their own mess of what was done by the previous administration. Have we got any other questions or comments? Councillor Coleman. Hi there, Sally.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. Regarding the state visit that's been asked about already, I fully support the concerns that everyone seems to have. However, I'm concerned as to why we aren't showing a far stronger stance on this, and why we're still absorbing unreimbursed national costs instead of demanding in advance that the government pays in full. And is there reluctance to issue firm funding conditions because the council feels indebted after receiving emergency financial support, and therefore worried about challenging the government? Has the financial support now become a tool that allows Whitehall to use us as a host venue at our expense? If this isn't the case, then can we show a stronger stance and have no hesitation to prove that stance? Could the borough now issue a clearer ultimatum with no state visit costs to be passed to local taxpayers unless the government commits to full funding up front?
Thank you very much. And I think Julian's got a question as well.
Yes, I have. Thank you. Mine is again about the budget and the fact that the budget monitoring report makes it clear that while the financial position may look okay on the surface, we've got underlying pressures which do remain significant for the budget. So I want to draw particular attention to the dedicated schools grant. At the end of September, the DSG is projected to be overspent by £5 million this year, taking the cumulative deficit to £9.5 million. The principal driver for this seems to be the high needs block, where expenditure seems to be rising faster than the annual funding settlement. And we're supporting more education, health and care plans than ever before. Seems to be up about 6% on the year. So I'd like to understand why this is happening. And also, while the headline position today appears balanced, the DSG is actually one of the most significant financial challenges that this council seems to have. So I'd like to understand really in more detail what steps we're taking to manage this very strategic problem. Thank you.
Lynn, 2 questions for you.
Okay. Thanks for the questions. No, there is no correlation between EFS and state visit costs. Completely separate and completely different departments. So no, that's fine. We are taking the strongest stance we can with central government. And we know that we are a royal town and we have expectations, but you can guarantee that officers are taking the strongest stance we can with central government at the moment. And we can update you in the future. Regarding the DSG, I mean, it's a statutory service. We have to provide it. There's nothing we can do about that. It's not part of our general fund at the moment, and hopefully it will continue to stay out of the general fund. It is a risk in years to come, and government have said that they are going to address this risk and put changes in place, do a review of the DSG and send. So we have to wait for central government to do that. But as I say, we cannot not do it because it is a statutory service.
Amy, do you want to come in?
Thank you. Thank you for your question, Councillor Sharp. When you benchmark us against other councils, the number of EHCPs we have per 10,000 population actually comes up very well. Yes, it is increasing. It's reflecting the uncertainty in the SEND education world. Unfortunately, parents are feeling very concerned about the delay to the SEND white paper that was due to be out about now and give some clarity on the future funding for SEND. That's been delayed until after Christmas, spring, we don't know. But there is definitely some uncertainty and some concern with parents who are not sure what the future holds. And it just reflects, unfortunately, a well-recognised national funding shortfall in this area. And it's something that we're hoping will be looked at and improved with the forthcoming white paper. I would say, yes, 5 million does sound an awful lot of money. It is a lot of money, but when you compare us to some councils who are looking at billions in their deficits, we also come out extremely favourable, which it seems ridiculous, but that is the case. And we work very hard to review and reduce where we can. But as we said, we're fulfilling our statutory responsibilities here.
Thank you, Amy. Richard?
Well, the SEND issue obviously is a well-known national issue, and a lot of councils are carrying these deficits that are built up and are under subject to, I think it's called the override, where they're not treated as part of the council funding. This is a problem that's been growing for quite a number of years, and neither the previous government failed to tackle.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your questions, Julian and Sally. Okay, can we agree this paper now? Is that agreed? Fantastic. Okay, now moving on to item 7, devolution. This report sets out a proposal for councils in the Thames Valley region, including obviously Windsor and Maidenhead, to submit a collective expression of interest to government to explore the benefits of a devolution agreement for the region. It's really important to note that it is only about beginning discussions with the government about becoming part of the devolution priority programme. It's not an agreement to go ahead. An agreement to go ahead, if we think it is the right thing for the Royal Borough, would happen later, after a business case has been written that clearly sets out the benefits to us and the risk to us in this borough. As I've said in many meetings now, I'm not a fan of these combined authority mayors. It's putting far too much power in the hands of one person. I like to work in a collaborative way with lots of different opinions helping us make the right decisions. However, sadly, it is clear that both the current Labour government and the previous Conservative government are really pushing for these mayoral models. It is not going to go away, and the transfer of powers and resources from central government is conditional on being part of these mayoral strategic authorities. What's also clear is that those regions with devolution agreements in place have received significant amounts of money from the government over the past few years, and this looks like it's going to continue. This means that we in the borough are missing out and will continue to miss out on money from the government. I want to make sure that we have access to more investment for social housing in the borough, in transport schemes which benefit residents and businesses in the borough, in regeneration schemes in the borough, in flood defences in the borough, and in skills and employment, particularly for young people in the borough. In any case, this is not a decision, as I said, to go ahead with the Thames Valley Mayor. This is just a decision to get the facts, to find out what is on offer, so we can make an informed decision. After all, as I promised when the Lib Dems took control of the council, we will always try to make evidence-based decisions. So I hope you can support this. Any questions or comments? I've got Richard.
Yes, Chair. I mean, and like yourself, I'm very opposed to the sort of mayoral one person carries all the money and power situation. I call it the Gauleiter system, and people who are students of history will know what that alludes to. But I think the money and additional powers available through the mayoral authority can't be ignored, and so the argument becomes sort of overridingly in favour of pursuing, at least finding out what it means for us.
Thank you, Richard. Mark.
Thank you, Simon. Yeah, I too have concerns about the one-person model, as you say, but hopefully, they can bring about a consensus. I am very excited about this as an opportunity. I see it as a potential to unlock significant investment in the Thames Valley, and that investment clearly from national government and also the global private sector. We have seen the region lagging since 2020, not helped by the disaster that's Brexit. After several decades of growth. So I think it is important to return to sustainable growth very quickly. And there are lots of opportunities here, as you've said, opportunities to invest in infrastructure, making travel easier, cheaper and more attractive than at present, investing in skills and training to boost the region's economy and economic resilience. And it's within that responding with agility to the needs of business so we can benefit from the good times and weather the tougher times in the economy. And then there's opportunities to strengthen wider areas of work, like with health, there's closer ties to the NHS, with safety, better alignment with Thames Valley Police. And also on the environment, there's the opportunity for a more holistic strategy that considers the whole of the Thames Valley, the benefits of the countryside and nature, and obviously the things that actually links the area, the river itself. There's cultural strength as well with the history and tradition of the region and the wide range of leisure attractions. So I agree, we need to make sure we're well positioned in the queue when it comes to devolution. So I fully support the paper.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions, Adam?
Yeah, thank you, Simon. I, like yourself and others, that I sort of echo the kind of sort of displeasure over the overall model of a one-person mayor. I think it's not a move in the right direction. However, I think there are, as Mark was alluding to, some benefits to working at over a sort of strategic geography. One of the areas I know the strategic authorities will get involved in is developing what are known as spatial development strategies. Why I think these are important is because they will effectively allow us to look over a greater area in terms of and look at the housing need over the whole area and allocate housing needs over that area rather than on a local planning authority by local planning authority basis. As I'm sure everyone recalls from last year's NPPF and potentially a new iteration of an NPPF, which will be coming soon, the underlying assumptions based on the mathematical modelling that the government have used there are just as flawed as the fair funding model equations. So this, the potential to work over a larger area and hopefully see our housing needs, the housing need level directed specifically to RBWM fall as areas with lower housing needs and fewer constraints take up more of the housing allocation would certainly be beneficial to RBWM. Likewise, in terms of delivery of housing overall, I know that there will be a big opportunity for these authorities to kind of steer and monitor the way how Homes England money is directed to areas within their areas. So I think, again, they will be in a much stronger position to attract that national funding through Homes England to get projects, particularly products involving social rented tenure housing into areas, which is, as we said, desperately needed. There's only so much we can do as a local authority area, but I think these spatial geographies will be much more effective at attracting those sort of investments from Homes England. So there are some positives in there, I would say.
Absolutely. Okay, I think we have. Oh, Lynn.
I'd just like to say that whether you agree or don't, you need to have a seat at the table to explore the benefits or not of this happening. And if you haven't got a seat at the table, then you haven't got a voice. So, you know, obviously I completely support having a seat at the table.
Thank you very much. Sounds like we're all in agreement. Andrew Hill, you want to say something on this one?
Yes, please. Thank you. I'm glad to hear it's a fact-finding mission at this stage, but it's worth noting that the programme director has already been appointed at £130,000 a year, so the bureaucracy gravy train has already left the station. One of the big advantages of strategic authorities is integrating transport. And in February this year, Slough Council published its report on devolution and said it was exploring working with London's mayor, which makes sense to me because for the vast majority of people in Maidenhead and Slough, it's TfL and London's economy that we rely on, not Oxford and Swindon. You can get advance tickets to Manchester for less than £30, but residents here often pay more than £39 a day just for travel cards into London, because GWR's control of the line into West Drayton means it can profit. The London Mayor can take control of this station and stop this under the powers given to established mayors. For real and immediate benefits, Maidenhead residents need to vote in the London mayoral elections, not the Swindon mayoral elections. So why did you exclude the option of negotiating with the Mayor of London and choose instead to work towards a mayor with Oxford and Swindon? There are three types of strategic combined authority, as you know: foundation, mayoral, and established mayoral. At full council last week, you told me you want to investigate the facts, and in my mind, that means looking at all the options, but you appear to have excluded foundation strategic authorities from consideration. Mayors can take control over individual planning applications and take control of strategic highways against the will of local elected councils. And you've said repeatedly that elected mayors are a bad idea because they have too much power. But foundations, by definition, have no mayor. So surely this option should at least be on the table, if not actually your preferred option. When I spoke at full council, I was worried about the statements you made with the other leaders that you would have access to £7 billion of magic money, in my mind, from, quote, additional tax from residents and businesses. So where does the £7 billion come from? Well, mayors can charge an additional element on top of council tax, known as the mayoral precept. And for Band H in Manchester, that's £257 more a year. So Cabinet, you are looking here at 9% council tax increases, another increase forced on you by an unfair funding formula, and even a mayor tax on top of that, potentially. So why are you risking an additional mayor tax, Councillor Werner, instead of exploring the no tax under a foundation authority model, for example? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, to be honest, as I think we've said, we're fact finding at the moment, and we're looking at the evidence of what the government's interested in. Now, the direction from the government very much is they're looking to fill the holes in the cut, those areas that don't currently have a mayoral system, and there's no appetite from the Mayor of London to sort of make Windsor of Maidenhead part of London. The money, most of the idea is it's money devolved from the government to the mayoral strategic authorities. As to the foundation authorities, they're pretty worthless when you look around. The biggest powers and funding go to those areas with mayors, and at the end of the day, if we want to invest in our infrastructure, if we want to invest in social housing, if we want to invest in our young people in jobs and training, then, at the moment and for the foreseeable future, mayors are the only game in town. So as other people have said, we might not like the mayor idea, but if we want to get money in for Windsor Maidenhead indirectly from the government, then we have to go with it. Let's see what the evidence shows once we have written our business case, looked at the risks, looked at the benefits, and then at that point we can make an informed decision. I think that's the best way to go, evidence-led approach. But thank you for your question, Andrew. Okay, can we agree that paper? I think we've already agreed it, sorry. Go on, Julian. What's your question?
Thank you. given what you said, I'm slightly surprised at what is happening, because I read an article in the local press talking about exactly the sort of alignment that we're talking about here with throughout Berkshire, but that seemed to be indicating, and I think it came out of Bracknell, so it may have come from the Bracknell council, that it was seriously being considered that our Thames Valley alignment would not include a mayor. So can you comment on that, please? Because I was very surprised to read that, given that they're supposed to be strategic mayoral authorities.
I don't know what you're quoting from. Bracknell are very keen on the mayoral authority of Berkshire and Oxfordshire, so I don't know how old that newspaper cutting was, so I can't really comment on something without seeing it. 2 years ago,
it was very recent. It was very recent. It was only from last week.
You'd have to share a newspaper article like that. It's I found it very unusual that they would be saying that when they're pursuing the Oxfordshire-Berkshire model. Sally, I think you've got a question. Did you say, Sally?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to support the administration in the approach you're taking and not waiting for Westminster to make the decisions for us. You're stepping forward, we're all stepping forward and exploring devolution, and that could bring investment, it could strengthen the local voice, and it could give the region more control over the big decisions that affect us. But exploring the opportunity isn't exactly the same as explaining it, and right now I'm concerned that residents don't really understand that we might be moving towards a powerful new regional structure led by a Thames Valley mayor. It's a major shift and the public hasn't been told very much at all. We can't talk about community empowerment while cutting the community out of the conversation. Local democracy mustn't be diluted in return for regional power. I think we all agree on this. Parish councils, neighbourhood groups and local voices must not become collateral damage in negotiations. My question talks to your concerns, Councillor Werner, regarding too much power in one place. How will parish councils be protected, respected and actively involved in shaping any deal, not just briefed afterwards? And if we're genuinely keen and concerned about strengthening local power, then why not explore making it stronger at the grassroots too? This conversation shouldn't stop at regional governance. We should be discussing strengthening local representation, including where the Windsor deserves its own town council. The two conversations, devolution as well as supporting local organisations, needs to, in my opinion, be happening together. Will the administration commit to a local democracy review at the same time so we don't just shift power around, but genuinely bring it closer to the resident?
Yeah, Sally, I think what we're saying here is we're not saying we want to have a mayor. We're asking to find the evidence. And then once we've got the evidence, that's when we would share and consult with the public. At the moment, we don't have much to share with the public, but I'm sure you use any mechanisms you've got to keep the messages flowing. As to the governance review in Windsor and Maidenhead, that's not really part of the paper. So maybe we can take that offline. Okay, so are there any more comments or questions? No? Okay, can we agree the paper?
Agree.
Okay, what have we got next? We've got the Microsoft licensing contract renewal. Jeff.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be brief. It's a very, very simple paper. We have a Microsoft Enterprise license agreement coming up for renewal on 31st of March next year. And this is just delegated authority to actually agree that license and actually agree a three-year extension to it. It does have some benefits. The business intelligence reporting called Power BI, great name, isn't it? Is better, and something called Copilot, which I have to admit is quite a useful AI tool, are in there and much improved, and the security around our systems will be very much improved. Obviously, security is something that's very dear to our hearts. We have to have it. And that in a nutshell is it, really. We need the licenses, so we're really asking Cabinet to approve that we go ahead with them.
Okay, it's the problem with monopolies, isn't it? We have no choice.
We have no choice. I'm sorry.
Okay, any comments or questions on this one? No, can we agree the paper?
Agree.
Housing transformation, and I think you want to take the local authority housing funds at the same time.
If that's okay with you.
Fine.
Okay. Well, I'll start with the housing transformation. I think, as we all know, housing, along with adults and children's, continues to be main source of pressure on our budget. We did inherit a difficult situation when we took control of the council, and our new assistant director, who came on board in the autumn of 2023, also inherited that difficult situation. In a nutshell, we had a hollowed out officer corps. We were missing key posts, outdated or missing policies and strategies. I think a total of 19 across housing and regulatory. And despite the sterling efforts of the small team of officers who were on board at the time, residents felt unheard and unsupported at the most vulnerable point in their lives. So we've been working to correct that against a backdrop of a number of challenges, homelessness increasing generally, and it's been confirmed by MHCLG that councils up and down the country faced unprecedented demand for housing services in the financial year 23 to 24, not just this borough. And it was caused by issues such as a historical lack of investment in social housing, initiatives like Right to Buy, the Thatcher policy from the 1980s, continuing to impact the availability of housing stock. Limited availability in the private sector, exacerbated by landlords exiting the market, and also socio-economic factors around employment, disposable income and benefits levels. On top of that, RBWM is an expensive area to live. We're not a stock holding authority, so we don't run and run our own housing. Temporary accommodation demand and costs climbing, and a very difficult financial position at the borough, which we've been working to untangle. So really a perfect storm of challenges there. However, the ship is starting to turn, and through my briefings with the assistant director and the tone of my inbox, I can see households that are avoiding temporary accommodation altogether by being supported into the private sector, households that are being moved into new social housing, both inside and outside the borough. And over the last few weeks, that totals 16 households into social housing, avoiding an estimated £376,000 a year. Also an increase in compliments and positive feedback from residents, with certain officers' names coming up more than once, and comments like, "It felt like a caring human approach." It's really great to see feedback like that. And some successful appointments as well. We now have a complaints review officer who's doing a great job, and we have an incoming data analyst who will help us improve our planning and forecasting. We've still got a way to go though, and on top of financial pressures, there's also a very human cost when you have a housing service that is on its knees, and that's why we need to go even further and be even more ambitious going forwards. So, to the paper, we're looking to introduce 15 new posts to enhance our business as usual activities, including homelessness prevention, and to deliver transformation, such as our temporary accommodation strategy, which we approved earlier in the year, but now need to deliver. Each household that we keep out of temporary accommodation saves us £23,500 a year on average. So 10 households is equivalent to £250,000 a year. The details of the transformation work streams are in Appendix B and include the delivery and operation of the Don West House, a temporary accommodation procurement strategy, levering local authority housing fund to deliver temporary accommodation and social housing, and there's more about that in the next paper, acquisition and demand initiatives, and a whole lot more. A note of caution, housing demand continues to be incredibly volatile, so it would be naive to assume that we'll always be on a downwards trajectory from here. We don't know, for example, whether national legislative changes might impact landlords' appetite to stay in the business. But by delivering this transformation, demand will at least fluctuate around a lower baseline. The ask is to use £500,000 of flexible use of capital receipts, and that's so that we can get started now rather than waiting until the next financial year. But there will be future investment via growth bids as part of the regular budget process. The transformation will be overseen by the Future Shape Transformation Programme. I'd like to thank our Assistant Director Housing and her team for their continued hard work on this strategy and in housing generally, and also MHCLG for their support and advice. That is the first paper. Do we want to discuss that one first?
Yeah, any questions on, any questions on the first paper? Helen?
The charitable sector's really important in supporting what you deliver. And in Windsor, we have the Windsor Homes Project. I don't think that they've been consulted or asked their views in this paper, but will they be affected if you restructure? Will they be affected by what you're doing? Shouldn't you ask their views and see how they're going to fit into the new structure that you have? That's my first question. The other is when you employ an additional 15 people, that's an enormous amount to simulate, and that in itself takes management time. So how are you going to cope with delivering the service when you admit you are on your knees, incorporating another 15 people into the service, and are you having a resource to manage that separately?
Thanks. Thanks, Councillor Price. So first question, has the voluntary sector been consulted on this? Not formally, as it's an internal restructuring, enabling us to deliver on our statutory commitments. So I wouldn't normally expect to consult externally on an internal reorganisation. But having said that, voluntary partners are aware of our current challenges and what we're doing to resolve them via informal conversations. And I know that this has been discussed with Windsor Homeless Project. I remain incredibly grateful to the Windsor Homeless Project for the invaluable work they do supporting homeless residents. So I'm really pleased that we'll be able to support their winter night shelter with a grant this year. And I also, anticipate that the work we're doing here will, ultimately they will feel the benefit of that as we reduce homelessness in the borough. A significant reorganisation, absolutely, it is a challenging situation. There will no doubt be an impact on existing staff in terms of onboarding and training, but it needs to be done and we need to get on with it. Ways that we can mitigate that are to try and find people with specialist skills already so that they can hit the ground running. And that might include judicious use of contractors in the short term where it's appropriate. Ultimately, freeing up our managers to manage rather than firefighting will make all that feel easier as time goes on. And I expect managers' time to be freed up more and more as time goes on, so that whole process becomes easier.
Any other questions? No. Do you want to move on to the? Oh, Lynn.
Yeah, I just want to add my support to this paper. It became obvious that the housing department had been reduced to a level that was given little or no resource to enable us to do our statutory duties, let alone do preventative work, and was obviously, resulting in increased costs for us. So, it wasn't even financially beneficial. So I completely support this paper. It will give better services to residents and enable us to look more to prevention rather than paying through the nose at the other end of the spectrum.
Thank you, Lynn.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, do you want to do the second paper?
Yeah, thank you. So the second paper, sorry, I don't have the agenda number in front of me, but it's about the use of local authority housing fund. So it's part of the transformation. A small part of it, but significant. So obviously, as I previously mentioned, RBWM, like authorities up and down the country, including Scotland and Wales, saw an explosion of homelessness in the financial year 23-24. Because RBWM wasn't a stockholding authority, that left us overly dependent on expensive nightly rates. We approved the temporary accommodation strategy earlier this year, and the proposal before us represents just one tranche of our efforts to reduce temporary accommodation spend. So the Local Authority Housing Fund, otherwise known as LAF, is the UK government capital fund that helps local authorities provide good quality accommodation for families facing homelessness. As we're not currently a stockholding authority, we're proposing to work with a registered provider to leverage this funding. And the provider would also fund the project using their own sources of funding, such as loans and third-party grants. The project will deliver 4 2-bedroom, 3 3-bedroom and 1 4-bedroom home to be purchased on the open market and brought up to standard. The borough would then lease them for 10 years to use as temporary accommodation before then becoming social housing, which we would have nomination rights to. So, a total of 8 properties represents 2.5% of our temporary accommodation burden at the moment. So it does rather feel like that we're chipping away at an iceberg. But that's why I'm keen for us to explore the idea of the borough becoming a stockholding authority in the future and being far more ambitious in our delivery of housing. However, until such time as that is a viable possibility, we will have to keep just chipping away with small but meaningful projects like this. And it's really important to remember that it's not just about reducing our spend, but it's about families at an incredibly vulnerable point in their lives being able to stay in the borough, close to their networks, their schools, their jobs, maybe not right next door, but in the same borough. 8 families facing a much more secure Christmas this time next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Helen.
I really welcome this, and I think this is a good way to go. If this fund has been available for several years, why haven't we taken advantage of it before now?
Thanks. So LEF funding, there are rounds of grant funding. We're currently on round 3. There is a round 4 just coming along. And there can also be mini rounds of funding where authorities have returned unused funding, for example, and that offers additional opportunities. Soon after we took control of the council, I found out that we were going to be returning unused LEF funding that the previous administration hadn't made use of. And I was determined that that was going to be the last time. So we pushed the property team to come up with a way of using the latest round of funding, and that's how we came to deliver the temporary accommodation units at Maidenhead, 14 units. Now, it is important to note that the terms and conditions for each round of funding are different, and there was a tighter scope in the previous rounds of funding. But I also think it's fair to say that there was no real appetite in the previous administration to deliver temporary accommodation or genuinely affordable housing, social housing. So, we aim to be different.
Sounds like you're fixing the mess there, Catherine.
Oh, maybe.
Okay, any questions on that one, Adam?
Yeah, fully support this paper. Obviously, really pleased to see the new in-house property services team working in partnership with the housing team to deliver this and make good use of this funding in a fairly innovative way. I think this is going to have a really good impact when it comes to our performance against the temporary housing strategy that we adopted a few months ago. This is sort of putting that strategy into action. Partly that's already been done with the redirection of those 14 units to temporary accommodation, but this is now taking those numbers of units even further up and keeping temporary house people within the borough, working with our strategic partners in the registered provider sector as well. I think this is really good news, and also the fact that after 10 years they revert to social housing and we have the nomination rights over that. So it's almost that we take the housing stock on the same journey as hopefully we're taking our residents in need. So really good sort of methodology to deliver on these really important priorities for us. So very happy to support.
Thank you very much, Richard.
Yeah, I think this is excellent, and it is shocking, isn't it? We desperately need social housing. We desperately need short-term emergency housing, and we were giving money for that purpose back to the central government, not having spent it under the Conservatives. So it's sort of disgraceful, really. So this is great. Housing for short-term, in the long-term, housing for long-term, and some savings. So brilliant. Thank you, Catherine.
Mark.
Thank you, Simon. Yeah, this is very much a step in the right direction. Very much welcome it. And for me, it shows what can be done when an administration actually cares about its whole community. Fantastic.
That's fantastic. I think we all love it, Catherine. Have we got any? All right. Okay, so can we agree both of those papers?
Agreed.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And one more for you, Catherine. Contract for nursing and residential care home placements.
Okay, thank you. So yes, contracts at Queen's and Clara Court nursing homes are coming up for renewal in 2027. So the background is that we own the freehold of these buildings. Housing Solutions and Abury run the housing management side of things in Maidenhead and Windsor respectively, and then Care UK delivers the care to residents. Thanks to inflation, contracts like these tend to feel expensive at the beginning of the contract and then better value towards the end. So we can expect our costs to be higher. Whichever way we go, whether we extend the KUK contract or go out to tender. And there is a third option, which is to ask Optilis to run these homes. And that's something, we're keen to explore as part of our manifesto pledge to bring services back in-house where it makes sense to do so. Optilis are currently running 2 homes in Wokingham. The benefit for people listening who may not know, Optilis is a company owned by RBWM and Wokingham to deliver adult social care. So they currently run 2 homes on behalf of Wokingham. And that's really helpful because we can benefit from their experiences and learning in the area before we commit to go down a similar path. Something called technical procedures that allows us to contract with Optilis without going out to a wider tender because we part own the company. It is really important to note though that whichever route we take won't necessarily present us with a saving. It's more that we're looking for a lower trajectory of growth. So at this point, no decision's been made, and we're not asking you to make a decision tonight on which route to take. But we are asking Cabinet to approve the kicking off of the re-procurement process. So just to be clear, that will explore 3 options: asking Care UK to extend their contract, going out to tender, or asking Optilis to run the homes effectively in-house. And we anticipate it will come back to Cabinet around the end of 26, beginning of 27 for a final decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Any questions or comments? No? Can we agree the paper? That's agreed. Thank you very much. Amy, we're over to you. Update on demand for school places.
Thank you. I'd just like to start, as I have done in the past, by thanking officers for the incredible amount of work that goes into this report that I deliver annually. It's an art, it's a science. I think there might be a bit of witchcraft in there, because it's really difficult to predict and project the number of children that will be born, the number of people moving into the borough, out of the borough, and we have to try and predict how many school places we will need over a period of a few years. So it's a lot of hard work, so thank you. We're looking at a situation where birth rates are lower than they have been in the past. People are not having as many children, and net inward migration to the borough of children between 0 and 4 has been varied. There was a high sort of up to 2018-19, then that dropped during the pandemic. It came up a little bit and peaked, but it's then fallen to about half that. So we like to keep a 5% surplus of places. That just means that if people move into the borough, they will be able to find a place for their child in a school. But obviously in some of our areas, we're seeing much higher surplus places than that. And that puts pressure on schools, because pupils mean prizes. It means funding, and where schools can't maintain and fill those seats, it can put real demand on the budgets. So the report is very, very detailed. It goes into all the different areas of the borough. It breaks it down by sub area, and it talks about the pressures that are on Windsor, Maidenhead, Ascot, Datchet, Wraysbury, the villages, and so forth, at primary level and secondary level, and seeks to provide a bit more clarity on where we may need more school places and where there are sufficient school places or too many school places. So really, I just wanted to draw out the 2 main areas that the report is asking for a decision on, and that is whether to reconsider or consider reopening a school on the Chiltern Road site in southeast Maidenhead. And the report is suggesting that actually we still continue to delay that decision. A free school has been agreed in principle for that site, but it's thought at the moment we don't really need that, and it can continue as the Send Careers hub that's being run by Manor Green for now. Because actually opening it could mean an extra surplus of places. The other main area that we need to consider is Windsor, where we have been saying for some time that the first school numbers are falling. That's not new information. We've been saying that for some time, but it's we've got less than 1% inward migration to our first schools in Windsor. There's not enough housing being built to offset that. The surpluses there are looking to be almost 25%. It's getting much higher than the 5% we want. And the new housing that is coming will take time to feed in, but we're not going to be seeing those peaks that we have in the past. So with Windsor, we're at the point now where we need to go away and have a look at all the options for reducing some places in Windsor through reducing PANs and other ideas. So we'll go away and officers will prepare an options appraisal on that. And I think that's probably about it. So it's just simply asking to consider those 2 things. If you're interested in your area where you live, the appendices for this report are extremely detailed. It's really interesting and really tracks all the different options and things that are going on. So please do have a look if you're interested. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Adam.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a brief one to say, I think it's really good that we're able to bring at this early stage, a decision regarding delaying that use or change of use for the Chiltern Road site, and enabling that to remain as a careers hub and doing important work in terms of pupil to adult transition within the SEND group in Maidenhead. I think it gives some certainty for at least another academic year. So it's good that that's not being deferred to the further options that we need to consider in a few months' time. So it's really to say, really glad that that early decision's being made.
Thank you very much, Adam. Any other questions or comments? Can we agree that paper? Oh, Mark.
Sorry, Simon. Yeah, just a very quick comment. I think for me, this sort of backs up the need for more first-time buyer housing from developers when we're talking about development, and just encouraging the demographics to shift down to the 20-somethings and 30-somethings across the borough.
Okay. Okay, can we agree the paper? That's fantastic. Thank you very much. We now have mobile homes, site licensing and fit and proper person policies. Richard.
Yes, the colleagues. So there are 4 policies here. They're in 2 pairs. The mobile homes site licensing policy and the mobile homes fit and proper person test policy. And then each of those has a corresponding fees and charges policy, laying out the basis on which we're charging people to apply for those 2 different things. All 4 policies interact with the borough's general enforcement and prosecution policy. I think it's fair to say that for a long time, the Royal Borough hasn't really been up to speed on these matters. The main legislation under which we're acting, the Mobile Homes Act 2013, I think that's 12 years ago. And you'll see in the reports that, in fact, nothing had happened since 2013 to bring these policies into existence. There's 2 delegated bits of legislation, the Site Licensing Regulations 2014 and the Fit and Proper Person Regulations 2020. So, as you can see, we're quite a number of years behind in creating these policies. The reason we're behind is back to that fixing the mess theme, cuts in funding leading to cuts in staffing, leading to not having either the right quantity or the right balance of skills amongst the council staff. We have now got some really excellent officers working in this area. They are having to work really hard to catch up a really bad backlog. And these 4 policies, which come from one particular officer, that officer is working on a load more missing policies in regulatory services. And I'd like to pay tribute to the amount of work they're shifting in what is a relatively small amount of time. The actions we're asked to approve this evening are the 4 policies plus a delegation to the lead member and the assistant director to keep the policies updated over time. The benefits to the council and to the community are that we will have a clear policy which allows us to consistently enforce the law, the registered legislation within RBWM. We'll also be able to recover the cost of administration and enforcement through the charges that the charging policies will allow us to make, and we'll just have a much more robust basis for enforcement. It's worth noting that these policies are strongly shaped by legislation and guidance. They're sort of straight-jacketed in terms of what we can do. And another thing to note really is that the powers that legislation give us are quite limited. So although we were putting in place a proper process for licensing and approving fit and proper people, a lot of the problems maybe that residents face will not be covered by the legislation that the council enforces. A lot of the problems will be covered by other agencies, particularly the police. I think that's it.
Thank you very much, Richard. Any questions or comments? Adam.
Yeah, thank you, Simon, and thank you, Richard, for that really good introduction to these suite of policies. As you've alluded to, they're long overdue, but clearly the regulatory team are working flat out to get a whole slew of policies in place, and ultimately these policies aren't just pieces of paper. They're really important in setting how these matters are dealt with within the council. I'm pleased to see I'm pleased to see the contents of these policies, particularly with the fit and proper person determination policy, taking on board a great deal of the non-statutory guidance that's been available for a few years now. Being able to sort of cast the investigation much more broadly than just necessarily the fit and proper person themselves, but looking at their potential associates and potentially other people who may be performing managerial functions on sites. So that's all laid out. The procedures are laid out for those investigations in the policy. Again, without the policy, there's no procedure. So it becomes completely nebulous how you actually handle this. So it's vital that we get these policies in place. As you said, we are limited, of course, by the legislation that we have. A big weakness in terms of our what we're able to do as a licensing authority, and this is reflected in the residential mobile homes license policy, is when it comes to consent to transfer existing licenses. We've done as much as we can in the policy, asking that at least 6 weeks notice is given to the council, but that is that's a request rather than something we are able to legally enforce, given the way the legislation is currently written. That is something we have to work within, and I think we push things we do push things as far as we can to have strong, robust policies here. I have been speaking and thinking about the legislation in that area, and we're probably fortunate to know the vice chair of the all-party parliamentary group on park homes, and he's kindly agreed to meet with myself and I'm sure Richard as well, to talk about some ideas I had potentially for changes to legislation in the future. But obviously that's well beyond my pay grade, and all our pay grades to actually enact here. But I hope that we can also look at strengthening where there's weaknesses in primary legislation as well, and hopefully the message will come across through groups such as the all-party parliamentary group.
I'm really happy to support you in that, Adam, and certainly know where to find Josh's office. The legislation is a bit of a colander, shall we say, and there's a real issue, as you say, about license transfers, in that effectively the legislation doesn't really adequately anticipate how that is meant to work, the transfer of the license and the transfer of the property at the same time. So there's almost inevitably, in how it's set up, you'll end up with a gap where the old licensee is still the licensee, but the new owner is the operator. And in that period, enforcement is really hard, because you can't really enforce against the old licensee because they don't run the site. You can't really enforce against the new operator because they haven't got a license yet. And I think it would be deemed unreasonable to try and enforce against them for not having a license when the process doesn't really allow for them to get a license that quickly. So there is a gap there, and it would be great to have something that meant that the conveyance of the property was simultaneous with the transfer of the license, but that isn't really provided for in the legislation yet.
Certainly agree with that, and just say when it comes to another reason why this policy is important, with looking at that transfer, clearly operating a site without a license it becomes potentially a criminal offence. So having a policy in place where there's certain expectations put on the different parties, if those expectations are not being met, and looks like they're the people are not necessarily complying or not facilitating the transfer, then they'll now can become a point. And by pointing to this policy where we say this is not working, there seems to be some sort of deliberate obstacles in the way, and potentially for looking at enforcing and potential criminal offences. So there are reasons why having this these policies is really important.
I think hopefully the indicative timescale helps to provide a bit of pressure for the license transfer to be dealt with as quickly as possible, so that the unlicensed period is as short as possible.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments, Helen?
I've got two questions about harassment. So is there a clear demarcation who is responsible for harassment? And by that I mean the police and the Royal Borough, so that it's not a case of saying, well, it's your responsibility, so nothing gets done. That's the first question. And the next is that if residents want to report harassment, is there a way they can report it either to the police or to the borough, that their identity will be kept confidential? So the police, for example, have a Crime Stoppers system whereby you can report things, and I think everybody's confident that that will be confidential. Is that something that could be put in place relating to residents if they're reporting to yourselves?
So for the first question, I think there certainly is the case that there's confusion amongst residents about what we can enforce and what the police can enforce. And that expectation is that we can enforce more than we can, and maybe not so much the police. Where we've got problems in the borough, I know the police are working hard on that, and they have put in place dedicated provision for people to give information anonymously. I'd certainly take away the idea for ourselves. I don't know the answer to the second question, but it is a really interesting question that I will look into directly, because I think that is important. A problem we have, and a problem with the legislation, and I suppose it's a problem that affects all kinds of prosecutions, is that ultimately to bring a prosecution by way of enforcement, we need evidence, and that means people do generally have to put their name on the line. And so obviously one of the concerns is that on occasion people are intimidated so that they don't feel able to provide the evidence that we need to deal with the issues that may exist.
Sorry, thank you very much.
Yeah,
Adam?
Yeah, just very quick. Yeah, I think you raise a really important point about the fact that there's the police and the council both have powers, but I think it's very important that we continue to work in partnership with Thames Valley Police and make sure that they realise that the powers the council have are in addition to normal powers to deal with harassment, antisocial behaviour, other related types of criminal behaviour. As Richard says, our actual powers to potentially prosecute under the 1968 legislation are fairly narrow. So it's not the case that that caravan mobile home sites are the council's issue and not the police's issue. It's that we both need to be working together, and maybe through things like the public protection partnerships, we can work closer with Thames Valley Police to keep pushing that point.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we've got Andrew Hill that wants to comment on this.
Thank you. These papers are collectively a huge step forward and clearly represent a great deal of work by officers who I'm glad you've thanked. And I also thank the Cabinet members, particularly Councillor Adam Mamanj and Councillor Richard Coe, for their considerable efforts to progress this policy to this point. You're absolutely right about the licence transfer problem, and I'm sure Councillor Reynolds will be instrumental in fixing that loophole. You state at paragraph 4.7 that when assessing fit and proper persons, you'll be getting information from other local authorities and from other sites. And that's absolutely vital to ensuring all sites around the country become safer over time. And the fact that the police and other services are consulted is also an important innovation. Well done. Can you please take steps to make sure that fees are not passed on to residents, as is stated to be a risk in the report? This, in my view, would be itself evidence of a person who is not fit and proper, and I don't think the law was meant to penalise residents. I particularly am impressed that you've taken on board the government guidance and the concepts that if more than one person is actually managing a site, they too must be checked, not just the nominated manager. Paragraph 3.15, it says criminal record checks are a mandatory element of the fit and proper person application and will be required for the relevant person and other responsible persons, plural. You then go on to define a responsible person as any person involved in the management of the site, such as a person regularly responding to residents' complaints or dealing with the management or contractual issues. So can I confirm my understanding that you have the relevant person at the top of the hierarchy who's checked, and then below them, all responsible people who are functioning in a real and meaningful sense as a manager will face a criminal record check? If that is the case, then perhaps to avoid any risk of ambiguity, could it be considered adding the word all into the sentence so that it reads, criminal checks will be required for the relevant person and all other responsible persons? I think that's your intent, but it would make it much clearer that everybody involved in the management of these precious sites has to be fit and proper. And perhaps related to that, paragraph 3.14, you're talking about associated persons and making reasonable inquiries. Perhaps it could be expanded to say reasonable inquiries, including potential DBS checks. But as I say, I mean, this will mean a lot, I think, to a lot of people. And thank you very much for the progress you've made.
Richard.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I think if you look through the policy, it refers to different management models, and I think the relevant person can be a legal entity rather than natural human beings. It could be a company. So there's an issue there, which is suggesting a model maybe say you have a site, but it's managed by an estate agency or a third party, then that would be talking about those people. So it would be maybe the responsible officer within that organisation, say that whichever member of staff in the estate agency did the bulk of the work would be the other responsible person. It wouldn't necessarily mean that everybody in the way I think you're thinking is covered. But I will, take the recording of this meeting and discuss it with officers to get a better answer to your question, because I just in case your understanding is correct and mine is not.
Thank you very much, Richard. Any more questions from anyone or comments? No? Can we agree that paper?
Agree.
Fantastic. Now we've got the advertising and sponsorship policy. So this sets out the principles for managing the borough's commercial advertising and sponsorship arrangements. It's another example of us setting up a policy to maximise income while also protecting our reputation and making sure we are not brought into disrepute. Basically, we're aiming to seek more opportunities to attract commercial sponsorship and put advertising on council-owned assets to support our vital services. The policy seeks to ensure all advertising and sponsorship opportunities support the council's priorities of creating a borough with safer, greener and cleaner communities and providing opportunities for all, which of course you'll all recognise as the council plan. I would particularly like to thank the efforts of the amazing corporate scrutiny panel for their comments on the paper. I always really appreciate the work put in by scrutiny to improve papers that are going to Cabinet. I think it's really important to understand, though, that this is specifically the advertising and sponsorship policy. This policy is focused on the more transactional advertising and direct sponsorship opportunities for our assets and events. There is also a social value policy being developed at the moment as part of a broader suite that will look more at strategic partnerships and corporate social responsibility. The recommendation is for the Director of Place to work with myself and the Chair of Corporate Scrutiny to put the final changes to the document from scrutiny and from comments that you make. So have anyone got any questions or comments? Helen.
I'm pleased that this policy is going to be taken away and worked on some more, because it's not right yet. The Chairman of Corporate has delegated the role of working with Director of Place to myself. So I will have the chance to bring all these points up. But I am concerned that since this was published, I've learned of more areas in the council that aren't aware of this policy, and yet they're involved in advertising. And so I feel we've got to go out again to make sure that all areas actually are aware of what's being attempted here. And whereas we do want to encourage more sponsorship, this policy is really a regulatory policy to make sure that we're doing things in the correct way. But it says that we're trying to encourage some more, but it doesn't say how we're going to do it. So I think we have to be clear what the purpose of the policy is. Yes, we want to encourage more, but we want to do it in the right way. And I think that's what this policy is doing. It's setting out what's the right way of doing things and what's the process we go through. And as an example, you've got two champions who interrelate with business. Well, there somehow should be a link if we're talking about sponsorship of how they link. Otherwise, we're going to have the right hand and the left hand not knowing what they're doing. So I would look forward to the next step in amending this and improving this policy so it is more watertight than it is at the moment. So those are my comments.
Thank you very much, Helen. I mean, as I said at the corporate scrutiny, this is a policy. It's not a work instruction or a process. It's kind of like an ethical framework into which we can build processes to get advertising and sponsorship. Items like the terms of reference, which I know you mentioned for the board, would be part of the sort of process that's developed on the foundations of this policy. Yes, it does to a certain extent constrain, as you say, but only to avoid putting the council into some kind of moral abyss of accepting cash from dodgy sources. I think the public has had way too much of that in the past. And so I'm sure we can all agree with the need to be careful with the reputation of the Royal Borough of Windsor Maidenhead. Yes, it is absolutely, you're right, important that all relationships are coordinated, and we'll look to you, make sure the contacts you have with businesses and the information you gain are passed back to the borough. And I'm sure that is something that will be picked up when the team are testing how the process works. I'm sure Andrew's really keen to get to work on those changes as your sort of representative of the chair of corporate scrutiny. As to how we progress this, I think we've already agreed that we will be doing an annual report on the progress on this, and those lessons learned as we go along will be included in that. I think it's really important that any of these agreements should be really transparent and open to the public for scrutiny. So an annual report at that stage is going to be really, really important for me. So yeah, I think that answers your questions, and I look forward to discussing it further with you and Andrew. Thank you. Any other questions, Jack?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I think this policy's got great aims. I mean, you know, encouraging corporate sponsorship, but you know, protecting the council's reputation at the same time. Obviously, we want to do both of those. I've just got a little question about sort of the bottom end of this. It's like a scenario, I suppose. If we've got a library celebration and the local cake shop wants to sponsor that by providing a cake, are we absolutely sure that we're not sort of blocking that with this policy? So what we've got is this useful bit where it says a suitable level will be determined below which a sponsorship proposal doesn't require sign-off by the board, and that seems like really, really sensible. I just want to make sure that actually covers the scenario I've sort of outlined there. Does the policy not apply when it's below that sort of de minimis level, or is it just that it doesn't have to go to the board?
Yeah, I mean, it still applies, but it wouldn't have to go to the board. But you know, £300 on a birthday cake for the library, I don't think that classes as being not acceptable according to this policy. Obviously, it's going to have to be flexible, but I think it's high performance sugar caffeine drinks and the sort of thing I think it's referring to, rather than anything more serious.
Okay, so chocolate cakes are excluded.
Chocolate cakes are okay.
There's no calories in the chocolate cake. That's brilliant.
Yeah. As administration, I can categorically say that we are in favour of cake. Everything in moderation, Amy. Okay, so any other questions on this, Mark?
Thanks, Simon. Yeah, just a quick comment. I think, yeah, this is another key step in strengthening governance, so very much welcome it. I note the comment from corporate overview and scrutiny to consider some form of reporting in the QAR. So I think that whether it's quarterly or, as you say, annual, happy to kind of look into that with you. and agree with the point about de minimis. I think we shouldn't be getting sort of caught up with small donations that are really donations and aren't true sponsorship. So I trust the policy will be clarified on that point.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, can we agree the paper?
Great.
Excellent, thank you very much. I think, that's the end of the paper. There are part two items, but I think we've covered them as we've been going through and haven't needed to go into part two. So thank you very much for your attendance, everybody. Good night.
Thank you. And it's good night from me. It's good night from him. She's still recording. Fortunately, I turned